You are listening to the Visualising War and Peace podcast. In each episode, we look at how people have experienced, described, or imagined armed conflict in different periods and places, and we discuss the impact which representations of war and peace can have on us as individuals and societies. Hello, my name is Alice Koenig, and I direct the Visualising War and Peace project at the University of St Andrews. In 2023, with generous funding from the Imperial War Museum's 1418 Now Legacy Fund, we're going to be hosting 2 art exhibitions designed to explore one of the many legacies of conflict, forced migration. Artist Diana Forster has created a moving art installation for us, which traces the long journey taken by her mother as a young child when she and her family were forcibly displaced from Poland during World War II to forced labour camps in Soviet Russia. Entitled Somewhere to Stay, its 10 panels depict the comfort and security of life before deportation and the various forms of accommodation which the forced migrants ended up trying to make home in, from wooden barracks in Siberian gulags to an ordinary house in Uzbekistan, to army tents, stables and a palace in Iran, thatched rondevals in Tanzania, and finally Nissan huts in resettlement camps in Scotland. The aim of this artwork is to communicate the unimaginably shocking rupture between a settled normal life and a terrifying future decided by people who did not care whether those they were transporting lived or died. Diana's family home was in fact in modern-day Ukraine, and the story she tells through her art obviously has distressing resonances with what many people are suffering today in many different parts of the world. Over the coming months, we want the story of this historic forced migration from 80 years ago to help us ask a question of great contemporary importance. How can we visualise the rupture, loss and long-lasting struggles experienced by people who've been displaced from their homes through conflict? To help answer that question, and to generate more conversation about how forced migration gets narrated and understood, we're releasing a series of podcasts featuring different voices on forced migration, including people with lived experience of displacement and a range of artists and authors who thought hard about how to visualise forced migration for others. Today, I'm honoured to be joined by Hanna Dushkova, a lawyer and expert on mediation from Ukraine. Hanna qualified as a lawyer in 2013 and got her advocate's licence in 2018. While working to resolve disputes between conflicting parties through the courts, Hanna became interested in mediation as a constructive and much cheaper alternative to litigation. And in 2019, she qualified as a family mediator with the League of Mediators of Ukraine. Since then, she's not only practiced as a trained mediator herself, but has also delivered lots of mediation training to others. Among other initiatives, she set up a mediation hub in a local school, and she developed a business delivering workshops on communication skills, non-violent conflict resolution, and emotional intelligence for adults and children. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Hanna's work began to pivot towards crisis mediation, particularly helping to resolve disputes between family members separated by the conflict. Then, in July 2022, Hanna was herself displaced from her home in Ukraine and came as a refugee to Scotland. She's now based in Dundee, where she's been drawing on her expertise as a mediator to support other Ukrainian refugees housed in temporary accommodation alongside her. So Hanna, I know you've got a lot of calls on your time right now. I'm very grateful to you for taking time to talk to me today. Thank you for joining me and welcome to the Visualising War and Peace podcast.
Hello, Alice. Hello, dear listeners. It's a great honor, a pleasure for me to be here today on your podcast. And I hope as a representative of Ukrainian community, as a voice of Ukrainian people, I will be able to share my own experience, my own points of view in the situation which I suppose a lot of Ukrainians live now.
Yes, absolutely. So, as I just said, you've been in Scotland for only a short while. The last few months must have been incredibly challenging for you, leaving your home in Ukraine and coming somewhere new. I want to ask you a bit about that journey later on in our conversation, but I want to start, if I can, just by checking how you are. How are you feeling after all the upheaval of your journey to the UK, and how are you getting on in Dundee?
I'm well, thank you. Dundee is a very nice city. Most of the people always ask me my first impression about Scotland. And perhaps my first impression about Scotland is that people are very open, sincere, kind and friendly, and always are ready to support and to help, to give any advices which will be helpful for me and my family.
That's good to hear, absolutely. Had you ever been in Scotland before you came in July?
No, it was my first experience.
I imagine you didn't ever end up thinking that you would live here.
even didn't think about possibility to live here, but I can say for now I a little bit feel calmness after the first months when I was evacuated. So it was a quite difficult experience. And for now, we lived in Dundee for 4 months, and we began to feel more comfortable. We a little bit adopted, integrated. We began to communicate it with different people. We met new friends, make networking. We try to be useful in this area with our main strengths, skills, and it supports us very much.
Great. And we will come on to the ways in which you've been using your skills in Dundee a bit later in the conversation. First of all, I want to focus on your work as a mediator, and particularly your work as a mediator actually back in Ukraine. So it would be good to go back 8 years or so to the time when you were a newly qualified lawyer observing conflict resolution through the courts. Can you tell us how and why you got interested in mediation as a possible alternative to litigation?
So in 2013, I graduated Odesa National Medical University. This is in Ukraine, one of the famous universities which provide lawyers. Since that period, I started to work in the court as a judge assistant. A little bit later, I worked as a lawyer in the law company, private firm. I realized that clients, we get the judge decision, we receive judge decision after our claim, but the clients are not satisfied with the result. So I saw this, and of course, I was a little bit upset the situation because we as lawyers try to do our best to use different resources, yes, sometimes force to get a result, but the clients are not satisfied. And I observed that we need to communicate with the clients, to communicate with another participants of the process. I mostly worked in the civil cases, family cases, workplace cases. And since that period, I tried to interest the knowledge in psychology. And of course, as a lawyer, we studied to mostly hard skills in the university. We didn't study soft skills. We didn't even have subjects which provided us how to communicate nonviolent, how to communicate ecological, how to keep calmness in stressful situations. So I realized that I don't have such skills. And sometimes I'm toxic to another people. I'm not very patient. I'm not very tolerant. And it makes me feel and analyze that perhaps I need to do something with this to improve my skills, my qualification, to develop in this way. And in 2018, the same year when I get the license of advocate, I was qualified as a mediator. With the support of my colleagues, I found the course, which was provided by the German organization, Deutsche Welt Academy. It calls Basic Mediation Skills. And I graduated this course. And after finishing this course, I analyzed that for me, this knowledge and skills isn't quite enough to practice really mediation. At the end of 2018 and on the beginning of 2019, I finished the course on family mediation. The organization which provided this course, you told, this is the League of Mediators of Ukraine. And since that period, I started to work as a mediator. Firstly, it was my participation in volunteer projects where we provided free of charge mediation services for the Ukrainian people. And a little bit later, I opened my own private practice of mediation and started to provide services to help people to resolve family conflicts, workplace conflicts, commercial conflicts. And in October 2019, I received an offer from Odesa private school to become a state mediator in school because the director analyzed that in the school environment, sometimes conflicts happen and she needs support in this way because she can't focus on her own functions and she needs her right hand in the conflict resolution. And it was something new for that school because in that period, the law on mediation wasn't accepted. The law on mediation in Ukraine was accepted only at the end of last year, in 16th of November 2021. So till that period, mostly regulation of the mediation process and services was by the document of the main minister's establishment. So it's not like a local document, it's regional. But mediation worked successfully. And for now, we have in Ukraine the law on mediation, and a lot of organizations are happy of this because for now we can explain the participants of the mediation how it legally regulates this process. Because in Ukraine, unfortunately, there is such a tradition that people feel more trustful when there exists law and they understand how it regulates legally.
So you ended up coming into mediation then with a sense, A, that some of the clients who you were helping with legal cases weren't satisfied with the outcome of those legal cases, even though lawyers had done their best and it had gone through a court system, but also this awareness that there were soft skills that all of us need, that all of us could usefully learn and incorporate to improve our communication skills generally, whether or not we're actually in conflict with each other. And you've mentioned family mediation, commercial mediation, and so on. So can you tell us a little bit about what difference mediation can make, which another form of conflict resolution like litigation can't?
The main difference mediation from litigation is that in mediation, we support people in the way to find the decision on the principle win-win. So where the participants, the both parties of the conflict, find the solution which satisfies the interest of both. Unfortunately, in the litigation, when I represented the interest of my clients, I always try to do all my best to win this case. And of course, another party will lose this case. Often such happens when the party gets the court decision, but it is, in the opinion of lawyer, it could be like a win decision, but the client is not satisfied. So this is the main difference, mediation from the litigation. The next benefits and advantages of the mediation process, I suppose this is the economy of time. And mediation, opposite the litigation, is quite quickly, because the longest case in mediation I had, it took me 2 months to resolve the conflict on the all questions. It was quite difficult case. It was case with the conflict duration about 5-10 years. And we resolved it on all the issues, on all the questions in 2 months. Mostly it take me to finish the mediation 2 individual meetings and several common joint meetings, 2-3 meetings maximum. So in 1 month, if participants of the conflict will be active and be sincere, will be interested in the way to resolve the conflict, they have possibility to resolve the conflict. I can't say that I resolve this conflict instead of them. No, I support them. I use my strengths. I ask right questions. I use active listening skills, empathy, and support them. But mainly they find the decision which will satisfy their needs. The third difference, parties could save money, because if the litigation lasts 1, 2, 3 or more years, people spend money on the lawyers, to pay court fees, on different expert taxes. So it takes quite enough money in Ukraine if you want to resolve your conflict in a court. In mediation, the different mediators suggest different ways of payment, but mostly it depends on how long the mediation process will last. But the longest process lasted 2 months and took us about 7 meetings. So I like to see the result. Sometimes people ask me, how do you prefer to solve conflicts? Of course, I say I always suggest mediation, because I like to see the results as quickly as possible. I'd like to give the people the support. They see the results. And the fourth main difference, mediation process from litigation, that the people can save their communication, their relationships, and can save their emotional, physical, mental health, because when people are in conflict, they feel a lot of emotions, anger, fear, trouble, so they live in these emotions. And as a trainer on communication skills and the practice mediator, I can say that if we, during a long time, gather these emotions in our body, and it will be very bad for our mental health, physical health, emotional health. So in general, mediation leads to support, of course, the relationship, communication, and emotional balance of the participants of the conflict.
You've really sold mediation to me there as a wonderful alternative to litigation, cheaper, faster, but also this win-win, as you say, this sense that actually everyone involved in the dispute gets to take something away that they're satisfied with. And those very important points about saving their emotional health, preserving relationships. And I think the thing that really stood out for me as well was the point you made about the people involved in mediation being the ones to resolve the conflict themselves. It's not resolved for them by advocates. It's something that they work at. So I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit more about your role as a mediator, what you do to help disputing parties identify common ground, understand each other's positions and so on, and what role they then play in resolving the dispute themselves.
So mediation process starts from the two individual meetings separately with each participant of the conflict. Individual separated meetings tell that I'm not a judge, I'm not a professional who give any recommendations or suggestions how to resolve this conflict. So I'm a neutral person who only try to support you in your problems, in your positions, in your thoughts, with your emotions, but only you have to resolve your conflict because this is your life. If I will resolve conflict instead of you, you will at the end of mediation close the door, come to your flat, and you will live with the decision. If my decision, which I found for you, will not satisfy your interest, you will not lead to this decision. Because you don't like it. So it's very important that it must be their decision. So decision of these participants of the conflict, because they will execute this decision. So they will lead this decision. And this decision must satisfy their interest and needs. Four main principles of mediation. As I told, the first principle is the neutrality of me. Like the second principle of mediation is a voluntariness. Nobody could be forced to be in the mediation process. So it must be their own decision. They must agree to work in mediation process, because to participate in mediation, it's emotionally hard sometimes because people had to involve in mediation in their memories, sometimes from the childhood. And it's necessary to put on the table all your problems, to discuss with the party, perhaps to whom you are hate or dislike, to speak. It's of course difficult. And the second principle of the mediation is the confidentiality. So it means that I'm as a mediator. Everything I hear in the cabinet, in the office of mediation, lives in the cabinet of mediation. So I can't spread this information anywhere on the participants of the conflict and also on me as a mediator. And the last main principle of mediation, which I explained to the participants, this is sharing the responsibility and my responsibility. So their responsibility to be active in process, to be open, to be sincere, even if it's sometimes emotionally hard, but they have to try. And my responsibility to lead them through the mediation process and to support them, make the comfortable and trustful atmosphere so the people could trust firstly to the mediator, then to the mediation process, and then to rebuild this trust to each other. If after the individual meetings, participants of the conflict agree to start mediation, because mediation process starts from the first joint meeting. After that, they have to write agreement. And I ask somebody who wants to start first to start their story, and ask a simple question. Please tell us what happened, why in your opinion conflict happened. Then I could ask, when the party finished his story, the thoughts and point of view of the first party. And of course, then I give the possibility to be heard by the second party and ask him the same question. How do you see the situation? How, in your opinion, why the conflict happened? So the parties step by step start to see the different point of views on the same situation. I always say on my trainings on communication skills and emotional intelligence that the cylinder of truth, if we see in front side of the cylinder, we see the circle. But if we stand in the behind side of the cylinder, we see the square. So the conflict is like a cylinder. And participants of the conflict who stand in different sides of this cylinder could see the conflict in different ways. And my main goal as a mediator to give them understanding that another person in the conflict saw from the another point of view. And if you want to see what he saw, put on his shoes and try to see from his point of view in that situation. My colleagues and me always say that the mediator is a third ear, because we try to hear that something couldn't be heard by the party of the conflict. So I am that third ear in the process. Communications in life, all the words consist of two parts, emotional part and rational part. And mostly conflicts happen on the emotional part. So when the people come to mediation process, of course, they speak on the level of emotions. And I try to show them how to speak on the length of rational thinking and to understand others.
Thank you. That's a fantastic overview of the mediation process. And I really like this idea that you're the third ear, and that part of your role as a neutral mediator, a neutral third party, is to translate the emotional into the rational and then help the participants in the conflict to do the same and start speaking more from that rational point of view and less from the emotional point of view, but ultimately to come to that place of understanding and love and support. And that's really peacemaking in stages. You mentioned earlier that when you were in Ukraine, you set up a mediation training program in a school setting in Odesa. Can you tell us why you think it's important that mediation is actually part of education?
I generally could say that even when I started work as a mediator, and then I started to work as a mediator at school, then I started to work as a trainer, I observed that unfortunately our educational system didn't implement it in the education of the primary school or secondary school, such a subject like how to communicate with the friends, how to communicate in the family. I had such thoughts about implementing the subject in the educational system, which could call not soft skills, but how to communicate with others, how to communicate with ourselves, and to give students of primary and secondary school the skills how to be a little bit peacemakers in our own life. Because I always told children on the lessons which I provided when I started to work at school, I realized that it's not only helpful to work as a mediator in the cabinet of mediation, so it's better to work complexly and to, of course, resolve conflicts, but it's very good to work on prevention. And how prevention could look, it's very good to organize education sessions, education training courses in the school environment on different levels, for the students, for teachers, and for parents. And for students, I created and developed 1-year course, which called Basic Mediation Skills. And I studied students how to be self-aware, how to recognize our own emotions, how to work and to deal with our own emotions, how to be empathetic, how to understand better emotions of other people, how to build ecological nonviolent communications with others. And I always told them on my lessons that these skills which I give you, they are most general and you can use these skills anywhere. If you want to be successful in your life, if you want to be happy, if you want to love and do everything from the position of love, because you have your love, this love in your heart, and you do something from this love.
So thank you, Hannah, again, for another fantastic overview of mediation as a valuable life skill that can prevent, not just resolve conflict. And that's one of the reasons why it's such an important part of education, learning to understand our own emotions, learning to be active listeners, to analyze from different perspectives, to be respectful in our communication, all of these being lifelong skills. So you have helped us see mediation as an important tool, not just in conflict resolution, but also in conflict prevention in lots of different settings. And of course, mediation can play important roles in resolving or preventing interstate conflicts and armed violence. It's also very important for civilians caught up in the middle of a conflict, as you have experienced yourself. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, life changed in all sorts of ways for people in Ukraine. Many men were required to sign up, many families were displaced, many people faced new economic challenges, all sorts of industries were impacted, and people experienced lots of personal anxiety and trauma. And you realized, I think, very quickly that people needed mediation support more than ever. So you worked with the League of Mediators in Ukraine to set up some vital crisis mediation and family mediation to help ordinary people impacted by the war. Can you give us some examples of the kinds of situations in a conflict where ordinary people might need an extra mediation help?
Since the war started in the February 2022, the local Ukrainian authorities accepted such rules that the people who would like to evacuate, they could cross the border without foreign documents, without foreign passports. So only having Ukrainian passport, which we used in the country, not if we want to travel and to move somewhere. And people, if they didn't have sometimes documents foreign documents for the children could cross the border only with these documents. And of course, in the peaceful time, when a woman or man would like to cross the border with the child without the second parent, they need agreement, documents, legal agreement from the second parent that he doesn't deny crossing the border first parent with the child. And when the war started, this rule wasn't necessary, and women, sometimes men, were divorced and had bad relationships and communication with the other party, used the situation and crossed the border with the children without agreement of the second party. And it's the first, perhaps one big number of conflicts which began to increase after the war started. So women moved somewhere to Europe, to USA with the child, and it leads to that fathers or mothers who left in Ukraine don't know where their child, where do they live. He can't communicate with their children or child. On this base, the conflicts began to happen. So this is the one huge number of conflicts which happened and began to increase in Ukraine now. The second, perhaps, huge number of conflicts, this is the conflict because the families are separated, because somebody left in Ukraine, somebody evacuated, and people can't be in touch like when they live in one space, they see each other every day. The number of conflicts, a lot of conflicts began to increase. And in this way, we, as a volunteer mediator, so since July 2022, our organization, I work as a volunteer, the League of Mediators of Ukraine, organized with the support of international organizations, international donors, organized the project, the family mediation in the time of war. I became the coordinator of this project, and this project entered 50 mediators from Ukraine. A lot of mediators left in Ukraine, a lot of mediators evacuated all over the world and live in Europe, in USA. And the main goal of this project to support people in this cross-border family mediation, when we try to support the interests and needs firstly of the children and then of the parents. And we provide these services online and free of charge for all the Ukrainian people who were displaced, who were suffered because of the war, and who want to improve their communication, who want to resolve the conflicts and to make their life happier.
Yes, so you've sketched there some of the many impacts, the many ripple effects of conflict, separating families, causing so much anxiety, so much trauma, so much loss, all of which exacerbate maybe existing communication problems between, let's say, divorced families, or just brings new communication challenges to families who had been living together, financial strain as well, intergenerational disputes, the tensions of displacement, all of that, meaning that people are struggling to communicate and need that level of support. Of course, as you say, some of the families that you were helping while you were in Ukraine had been separated and displaced by the conflict, and this ended up happening to you. So do you feel comfortable telling us now how it got to the point where you decided that you had to leave Ukraine?
The decision to leave Ukraine came to my mind, to my husband, mind of my parents in 3 weeks when the war started. So I even remember this day now, when the war started, 24th of February. We wake up with my husband at about 7 o'clock. The call firstly was a message from my sister, and then was the call from my husband's mother with the words, "Wake up, didn't you hear? The war started. Russia attacked Ukraine. Please wake up quickly, gather your clothes, and we need to resolve to what we will do in this situation." Because in Odesa, from this city I lived my parents, my sister with her husband, and we decided after that to gather at the home of my parents and to think about what to do. We were afraid that it will finish in several days. We couldn't even imagine that in this 21st century such could happen. So the war could happen in the time of civilization, on the time of communication, relationships between different people in general. We couldn't imagine that such situation could happen. And we were really waiting for finishing in several days, perhaps 1 week. But when we observed that 1 week finished, second week finished, third week finished, and it wasn't stopped, we analyzed that it's necessary to do something, because in this first month of war, I lost 5 kilos. I slept only 4 hours a day, because every time we read news, what's happening in this city, which city Russia attacked, and we were afraid. To be honest, every night went to the bed, were afraid that the Russian bomb will fall down on our roof of our house and we will never wake up. So it was my big fear, and it's impossible to live in this fear, to wait that something will happen. Perhaps the main fear was the deaths, that we will not live, or something will happen with my relatives. And we decided to evacuate. It was on the beginning of March. So we moved to Moldova, because I there had relatives from the side of my father. We were there a little bit, and then moved to Spain. And from Spain, we analyzed if we want to live, to work, to continue our life, to develop our family, to think about children. We need to be proactive, to do something, because in that period I feel like I stopped. I don't develop. I live on my life on pause. So I don't live successful, happy, full life. And our friends shared with my husband experience of the evacuation to Glasgow, to Scotland, and we filled in the application form for visas to the super scheme program in the Scotland. We applied, and it seems to me in the June, in the beginning, the middle of June, we get a successful answer. And in July, we arrived to Scotland. Perhaps it was the hardest decision in my life. When I meet new people in Scotland and people ask me about my experience, and I don't even analyze how it happened, I tears began to follow down on my face. But life continue. We're trying to do our best, but it was the hardest decision to gather everything you earned, everything you had in your life in one suitcase. To put all your work, all your clients, all your plans, all your clothes in one suitcase, in one rucksack, and to evacuate with the thoughts, will you come back ever or no? Will your house be safe? Because in Ukraine, we left our flat, we closed it with only one bag, came to Scotland. So this is our experience. Perhaps I wouldn't ever wish somebody to have a similar experience, because I analyze how it is different. Even now when I walk on the street, and because in Odesa in these 3 weeks, we heard something was explosion. We heard this, and after this fear, I analyze like a trainer on communication skill, because the high intensive level of this fear. Even now, when I go through the Dundee or somewhere, and I hear something very strong, I begin to feel uncomfortable. So I feel this reaction in my body, and I understand this is like a protective reaction in my mental health. Analyzing all my experience, I can say that as long as more people stay in the area of war, more negative results will be for their mental health, emotional health, physical health, and for their relationship, families. I always say that all Ukrainians lost something in this war. Grief came to each Ukrainian family. Somebody lost flat accommodation, somebody lost job, clients, somebody lost the participants of their families when somebody died in the family. So this is the worst thing. We see now the negative result of war on Ukrainian people. With the people whom I sometimes contact here, I see the level of tension and aggression in the communication between people. I see the result of trauma on people, because as more people evacuate from Ukraine, and as long as they stayed in Ukraine and then evacuated, as more level of trauma, of tension and influence of trauma they have, because people who arrive from the war territories, and with this we will have to deal in the future 5, 10, 20 years. So a lot of work we will have to done to rebuild, reconstruct the mental health of people, physical health of people, relationships between people, because even now a lot of tension between Ukrainians who left and who evacuated, because people see on the same things, they see from different points of view, as I told in the very beginning. But I always say that in this situation, in the war situation, this is not normal situation for normal life, and all our reactions, all our emotions is normal. So this is normal, our reactions and emotions for non-normal situation in our country, in Ukraine. And each person try to protect himself, his family, his relatives in his own way, and his way will be correct for him. This is his way and he is correct. It's necessary to understand. So something for me will be correct way, for other person will be something another correct way. Different points of views. It's something what is difficult to accept for Ukrainians sometimes.
Thank you for sharing that very personal story there, Hannah, and for giving us insights into what it was like in those early days of Russia's invasion, as you lived in fear and the fear impacted your body and your mind. That sense of not knowing what the next day would bring, not knowing how quickly it might be, things might happen, or how long it might take. And then the unimaginable rupture of, as you put it, having to pack not just all your clothes, but all your plans and your whole life into one suitcase, and to embark on a journey where you didn't know the destination. And as you said, living a life on pause. So going to Moldova, then going to Spain, and then having to take stock and trying to take back some kind of control by deciding where to go next and deciding where to try and build a new home, and coming to Scotland through that super scheme in June being the hardest decision of your life. But as you say, the decision that was right for you at the time in those extraordinary circumstances. What kind of support have you had along the way and in Scotland? And what have the challenges been as you've begun making a new home in Scotland?
We arrived at the end of July, and we arrived to the Edinburgh, to the welcome hub where all the Ukrainian refugees arrived. In the same day, we gave the possibility to move to the hotel, because the workers of this welcome hub told us that Edinburgh is full, Glasgow is full. We can send you to Dundee, to the hotel. We, of course, agreed, because we didn't have another place to stay for a night. We agreed, and we are very happy and thankful for this possibility. We arrived to Dundee. It was a very interesting experience, because it was end of July, and in Ukraine, mostly the weather in the end of July, in the end of July, is about 25-30 degrees above zero. And it was 60. And my husband told, whoa, so it is very cold summer here. How we will live in winter? What we will do in winter? But in several days, in several weeks, I suppose, we managed to adopt. And for now, it's not a problem for us. We felt comfortable in the summertime, in autumn, and for now, even on the 2nd of December, second day of winter, we managed to adopt. And because winter in Ukraine is a little bit similar with Scotland, sometimes even colder, because the Scottish people told me that here the weather in winter more than -2 degrees below zero. But in Ukraine, we had sometimes -20. So we settled in the Dundee in Queen's Hotel. And the first main challenge for us was to understand where will we live, because we understood that the hotel is temporary accommodation. But temporary, we lived in hotel for months. And only in the middle of November, we resettled by the Dundee City Council to the host family. And now we live in Dundee, but not in the hotel. So we are very happy with this opportunity. On the second day of our living on the hotel, representatives from the Dundee City very quickly moved to the hotel. Also, representatives of Red Cross organized all necessary support, ask people what do they need to fill in the different forms to get your BRP card, biometrical residence card. Any people need medical help or support, also connected us with the doctors, with the hospitals, and with the nurses. People who arrived without clothes, so the representatives of Red Cross organized any support with the clothes. If somebody needs food, also organize special food, perhaps some children who are very small needs for mothers of such children need special food for such children, so the representatives of Red Cross organized. Also, after basic closing our basic interests and needs, such as accommodation, food, rest, we began to think with my husband about possibility to find job. So this was our second challenge. We observed that a lot of tension gathered in the community of Ukrainians because people are separated with their relatives, with their partners who left in Ukraine. Sometimes because people were in trauma or after trauma, they didn't know how to deal with their emotions because they didn't have such skills. And I, as a mediator and trainer, I understand these people, but not all the people could understand others people with their own situations, with their own problems. So I realized that I want to be useful in this area, and perhaps I could implement my knowledge and skills to do something for our Ukrainian community. We created and developed our educational project for Ukrainian refugees and local communities, and started to look for the organizations, for the people whom to suggest the idea of our project and to deliver this project to as more as possible Ukrainian people and also local communities, not only Ukrainians, also another representatives of refugee communities, and also for the Scottish people. And we started from the first training, which we conducted in our hotel. I made Google form, I make announcement in our chat, where was about 70 Ukrainians. In Dundee, since the summertime, July, August, were about 5 hotels full of Ukrainian people. And of course, were people who lived in the families. So I don't know the number of these people, but I suppose in the Tayside area, there were about 2,000-3,000 Ukrainians. We decided to start from our hotel and organized a training on communication skills for 8 people. After that, people said us at the end of the training, it was for 2 hours, and we mostly spoke about the emotions, how emotions are born, how they live, where do they live in our body, how we show our emotions, how emotions influence our communication, how emotions influence and conflicts, and how to deal with the emotions. I gave practical exercise, how to self-manage and self-regulate in stressful situations and to reduce the level of tension in the bodies of people and in the communications of people. Me and my husband, we together did this training in the middle of September. This was our first training for Ukrainians, and we received good feedback from the participants. They told that such skills are very helpful and necessary, and they would like to visit trainings if I will provide my educational project and program. And I analyzed that it's necessary to do to move forward in this way, to continue. They have possibility to speak, to be listened and heard. And we then continued to organize another training. The second training was in the employability team at Dundee City Council. The second was several trainings for the representatives of Scottish community. We organized next training for the workers of employability team of Dundee City Council and push humanitarian team of Dundee City Council, because we wanted to explain to the local Scottish community and the workers of different establishments what do we provide, what do we deliver, because they didn't understand the ideal. And we delivered several sessions for them now, and hopefully we will continue to share our experience, our knowledge, and to support people in the easy integration, relocation, and adaptation in Scotland.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done an amazing job, Hannah, of adapting your skill set and your training and your expertise to this unique situation, really identifying the needs of other Ukrainian refugees alongside yourself to deal with all of that trauma, understand their emotions, understand how to regulate them as far as possible, and just giving them the tools in the toolbox to deal with tensions, communicate with each other, communicate with the wider community, build resilience. All of that then feeds into integration, adaptation. Ultimately, these are skills that enhance employability, that enhance their ability to make a life, to settle, to plan for the future, and so on. Such important work. And that's important work that has really helped me to see a bit more some of the challenges of forced migration, as well as some of the ways in which forced migrants can be supported. One of our other upcoming podcast guests, Lena Fadel, has talked really passionately about the power of not just storytelling, but listening to deepen understanding, to deepen empathy and mutual respect around forced migration and forced migrants. So it's really fascinating to hear about the specific listening and communication skills which you've been helping people to develop as a key coping strategy in life generally, but especially amid conflict and displacement. So as you say, you've ended up working with local council. You've been welcomed into the Scottish network of trained mediators. Are you hoping to keep growing your practice here? And will you continue to focus specifically on supporting refugees as a key part of your work?
For now, what can I say? In September, since we arrived in August, I managed to get in touch with the Scottish Mediation. This is umbrella organization on mediation here in Scotland. And I contacted with them, with the director of this organization, Graham Boyack, represent myself, had a meeting, conversation with them. I'm very happy that in September, I was qualified as a mediator by Scottish Mediation. So now I'm in Scottish Mediation Register, and I have possibility and right to practice as a mediator here. As for my plans to continue my life and work, my projects here, I can say that I would like to focus on these two main things, perhaps to develop and to work forward in realizing my educational project for the local communities and Ukrainian refugees. The first way perhaps will be of trying to be useful here. And the second, I will, of course, work as a mediator, because for now, I continue to work as a mediator in this project, Family Mediation in the Time of War. I work online on a volunteer basis. And of course, I will continue, I hope, to develop my mediation practice here to support not only Ukrainians, but also another local communities and another refugees. I suppose I will have requests on these services. Of course, I could be helpful in the conflicts between Ukrainians and other people because a lot of Ukrainian people, unfortunately, who arrived, the main barrier for them because they don't know English. And because I know English, I know Ukrainian language, I know Russian language, I could provide mediation services for representatives who speak on different languages. So I hope I will continue also a mediation practice as a mediator here, and also develop my project. And for now, I have a pleasant news. Since Monday, we started to realize my project with such organization here in Dundee as a circle. Since 9th of December, we will start to work with the first group in the area of delivering communication skills, emotional intelligence, the theory of conflicts, nonviolent communication. So we will gather 3 groups in December and January of Ukrainians. For them, it will be free of charge. Each group will study during 2 weeks and have from me 4 training sessions or 3 hours each. With my husband, Vitaly Diakov, will deliver them these training sessions. And also in the area of this project, people will have possibility to find job, because the project calls, in the cooperation of me, Vitaly, and the circle, it calls hidden talents. So the goal of the project to give people communication skills of emotional intelligence, and to give them possibility to gain the opportunity for a job. So CIC organization, which works in Dundee and Glasgow, and they will be able to see, to observe how this organization works, to try as a volunteer. And if they will be proactive, there will be free positions in this organization. Perhaps they will be able to stay there to work. And perhaps this organization, if will find other opportunities for these people to work, this organization will suggest them. So the idea to give people tools to show how it works in real life, in practice, how they could find job, how people could earn money using these skills, soft skills, and using their hard skills, and using their networking, which we could help them organize in this 2 week study. and it will hopefully lead to more happy and successful calmness life of Ukrainian people here in Scotland.
So thank you, Hannah. It's very inspiring to hear that work that you're doing, the projects that you're building. You are absolutely not living your life on pause, and you're using your skill set and your background to help other people not live their lives on pause and to move forward. And as you say, to start living calmer, happier lives and really make their home and make a future here in Scotland. You know, our project is all about how we understand, imagine, and describe forced migration. So, if I may, I just want to ask one last question of you. What kinds of things do you think people with no experience of migration ought to know about what it's like to be displaced and to have to make a new home somewhere unfamiliar? What would you like other people to know about the experience or the challenges of forced migration?
Perhaps I would like people to know and to explain that the people who have experience of forced migration, these are very strong people. When I evacuated in March, I thought that I evacuated because I'm weak. With my fear, I moved because I'm afraid. So I thought that I'm a weak person. But for now, since the period, since this, I speak now and I feel that my eyes became wet. That people who evacuated, these are very strong people emotionally. Their heart hurts, but the heart is strong. It is necessary to be a very strong person and to put all your life in one case and to move anywhere, to start from the bottom, to start in another foreign place, in the foreign community where you hear nobody. You have to do something from the very beginning. To study, somebody needs to study language. Thanks God and my parents, I know English because I studied it intensively in Ukraine. But people need to study language. This is basic main barrier. If people would like to satisfy their basic needs, buy food, find accommodation, to get documents from the legal authorities. And it's a great challenge for the people. And then you need to find schools or kindergartens for your children. And it is another challenge, yes. Then you need to find a job. This is a new challenge. And every day it's like a new challenge, new experience. I can say that only strong people could make this step, could start this new life from moving abroad. Of course, perhaps people in the peaceful time thought about possibility to move somewhere to start new life, but nobody thought about possibility to do in this way when the war started. Nobody wanted to relocate it, to remove, to immigrate in this way. Everybody, I suppose, wanted to immigrate when everything is okay. They have a contract or suggestion to move to another country because somebody suggests them to a new job, to the company, to work as a high educated person in a huge corporation. But when you arrive without nothing to a foreign country, it's very challenging. It's not easy, but step by step, I suppose, if people firstly will deal with their emotions, how to communicate with themselves, because I always say, if you want to communicate with other people, start from yourself. Start communication from yourself. Try to understand your thoughts. Try to observe what you see. What is your behavior to what you see? Try to understand your emotions, your feelings, and then you will be able to understand other people. You will be able to communicate with others. But everything starts from ourselves. Peaceful in the world starts from ourselves. Hopefully, believe people will recognize this, and my project will be able to support people in this way, and they will be able to start happy new life here with the closed all the needs and interests here. And I hopefully believe this war will finish, and then people will make their decision to move back if they have place where to remove, because a lot of people don't have where to come back. As for example, Mariupol city was totally destroyed. More than 20,000, it seems to me, or more people were died, peaceful, innocent people, and a lot of people don't have where place to come back. And if they will decide to live here, to stay here, because as longer people stay abroad, it's more possibility for them to live there, because they gather their community, they gather networking, they gather friends, they find job. So if the people decide to leave, of course, each way of resolving their own issue will be correct for them. And even when a mediation starts, I always say the participants of the conflict that for me, all the parties of the conflict are right in their own way. And we need to understand on which position, on which way everybody saw the situation.
Thank you, Hannah. As you were talking, my eyes became wet too, I have to say. And that point that you made, that very important point, that people who go through forced migration are not weak but strong and have to be strong, is, I think, the big takeaway for me of our conversation, not least because our conversation has really demonstrated your strength, your incredible strength, not just in moving, but in, as you say, starting from the bottom, having to build up everything again. It's a long, slow process of leaving, of rebuilding every part of life that we normally just take for granted, and also leaving so many things behind, the things that you miss, while trying to learn something new every day, learning new languages, learning new processes, learning how things work in a new place, and starting to build networks and so on. You've really helped shine a spotlight on the challenge after challenge after challenge that people who've been displaced from their home and have come to a new place have to face on a daily basis. So thank you very much for that. And you've also given us something very positive to take away from this idea that mediation, emotional intelligence, and non-violent communication are vital peace-building skills, and that what you're doing in mediation is fundamentally peace-building that starts with individuals but spreads out into relationships and into communities. And as I say, that's another of the things that I'll take away from this conversation. So thank you, Hannah, so much for making time to talk to me today. It's been really inspiring. Very grateful to you for sharing such a personal story, which is very difficult for you to narrate and difficult for people to listen to. But it's a story that has also so much hope and so much strength in it. And I feel very privileged to have been able to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice, very much for this. For me, very deep questions, I suppose, very important questions. Perhaps somebody will hear my story and it will a little bit support them that it's possible, yes, to start new life if people look for a space. Hopefully, believe my story will inspire somebody, will support somebody. And it was very pleasant to meet you today. The questions were very touched to my heart. Thank you for invitation.
And thank you also to you, our listeners, for joining us again. Do keep tuning into our podcast. As I said at the start, we've got a series of episodes coming out exploring lots of different aspects of how we visualize forced migration as part of our wider work on war and its aftermath. And you can find out more about that by visiting our Visualizing Forced Migration website. If you have any questions about our work, please do get in touch. You can follow us on social media, just search for Visualizing War, or contact us directly by emailing us at viswar@standrews.ac.uk. If you'd like to support our project, please share and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you use so you don't miss an episode. And please do leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts because it really helps people find the show. Our theme music was composed by Jonathan Young. The show was mixed by Zafir Gertin. Thank you very much for listening.